This is the J. Scott Outdoors podcast on Western big game hunting and fishing, and I'm your host, J. Scott. I live and breathe hunting and fishing, spending half the year in the field enjoying God's creation. I hope you'll enjoy hearing about our adventures. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have an exciting show with a real up-and-comer in the bass fishing world here in Arizona. Manny Chee of Manny Chee Outdoors produces an incredible website and has some of the best bass fishing videos I've seen. Welcome to the show, Manny.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, how's the fishing been?
It's been a little crazy this year. We've been experiencing some weird weather patterns. Fall is usually a really strong time for our bite, and this year the fall kind of got skipped. We just went from like a long summer into winter, and then now we're in some hot weather. But good news is the spawn is coming, and no matter what happens with weather, the fish are going to spawn, and we're already starting to see fish shallow, which is really good for our patterns. So it's all looking up.
Well, good. I'm glad the future is bright. And Manny, you're primarily talking about largemouth bass, correct?
Largemouth bass. I also, I specialize kind of in the swim baits techniques for targeting big bass, and also do carp on the fly, trout on fly, and also bass on fly.
You know, I follow you. I've followed you for a long time. I've known you for quite a while, but I follow you on Instagram, and I follow your website with all your great videos.
Thank
and
you
it seems
for that.
like every time I turn around, you've got a big old fish that you're releasing, and it's just fun to watch. It's great to see the enthusiasm you have for fishing. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how you started fishing, and let's start there.
Okay, I guess. Well, thanks for that, by the way. I also follow you on Instagram. Love seeing you guys' page. It's crazy the picture you guys put up, and we'll keep that up. I guess my fishing started, at 5 years old. My dad was not really much of an angler. He was more of a hunter and a wing shooter. But we grew up here. I grew up here in Mesa, and in the community where I grew up, there's a system of 8 ponds that are fed by canal waters. And the one thing that my dad did know how to teach me was how to put on a bobber, a hook, and a piece of corn. And
you were set then,
yeah,
weren't you?
and it was all about bluegill and sunfish back then. And I guess my first experience with bass or with something other than those bluegill was when I was fishing with my buddy George, and we had to be somewhere in between that 5 to 10-year-old range. And we were fishing, and I hooked into this bluegill. And I was really excited. I didn't want to take the bluegill out of the water, but I wanted to show my buddy George. So I ran over to him. He was probably 25 yards from me. And I was running with the fish in the water along the shoreline. And I was kind of running over, and all of a sudden I see this big black, green monster fish type thing come up, and it ate my bluegill while it was on my line. It shook out line, and boom, and instantly it snapped right off. Took my bluegill, my bobber, my whole setup, and that was my first experience really with bass, or even, the future, which now, years later is swim baits.
So that was your eye-opener
right
there.
That was it, yes. After that, it was like, wow, I want to be catching those fish. I want to see what those are all about. It was pretty much like a shark to me.
And how did you transition then? Because, everything I know about you is, you're chasing trophy fish. How did you then, just progress and start? Did you physically start chasing big fish? Did the light go off so much that you just said, that's what I want to do? Or
was it a
progression?
I'd have to say not at all. For many years after that, it was, buying all kinds of just crazy looking baits, spinner baits, crank baits. I always liked fluorescent colors and the crazy stuff like that, not knowing that, really what colors meant or why you want to choose one color over another. I used to go to back then it was Yellow Front out here.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was down the street. And I just used to go there and pick out a few lures and kind of kept throwing them. It's something that I really, I look back and it really brings it all together, that when when you have this angling thing in you, it's in you no matter what. because I know that I didn't catch fish for many years after that. It was a big struggle, and I don't know how I kept the interest in it, and I absolutely loved it. And even though I probably knew that I probably wouldn't catch anything, I would still ride my bike over to the local ponds and grind it out.
So, Manny, do you feel like today that same feeling as grinding it out as a kid? I mean, do you feel like, you have one of the best jobs in the world? Do you have that same love and feeling every day that you wake up about the future and for that day?
Absolutely. I mean, even just talking to you right here, like the hairs on my arms are standing up. I'm so stoked about it. I think you can see it in the pictures. I run around, I scream, I yell. It has become a little more about these bigger size fish, but at the same time, you kind of always have to take a step back and just love fishing, whether it's for bluegill, bass, tarpon, anything. And, one of the things that I was really lucky ever since I was little also is that my dad and my mom got a timeshare in Cancun, Mexico. And, that was a yearly trip that we would make in August. And for 2 weeks, I used to get to fish saltwater. So I kind of really got exposed to not just the freshwater, but the saltwater stuff and a lot of other different types of fishing, throughout that time. I guess also another important thing is when your parents kind of cater this love for the outdoors, whether it's hunting, fishing, if they kind of cater to it and help you experience it in the right ways, I think that that's something that definitely lasts forever.
Well, that's a great tip for any parent out there that's listening, to just keep their child interested and give them opportunities to hunt and fish. And tell me about Cancun, and tell me about, what were some of the fish you were catching, and would you go out and surf fish, or was it blue water?
It was, tell me. Yeah, it was back then. It was, pangas, the Mexican panga boats. And we would go out, and our trips consisted really of like snorkeling. Later on it was like with harpoons and stuff, but we would always also troll. And back then a lot of it was barracuda, dorado, skipjacks, small tunas, I remember, and the occasional like groupers, red snappers. And that became even later, sailfish and a lot of neat stuff. When I was probably in my teens is when we first started hearing about like the flats style fishing. And out there they have lagoons and flats where they have tarpon, permit, bonefish, and snook. And the snook I always found really interesting because I really related to it. It was like bass fishing on steroids, and kind of all the stuff that I always wanted to see here in my local ponds, like overhanging trees and laid down stumps. And we even started targeting them with a lot of the gear that we already had, the jerk baits and poppers and, things like that. So I was really lucky to have, a big progression there in a lot of different styles of fishing and a lot of different types of fish that I ended up, really loving later also.
Would you say, if you had to break it down these days, is your percentage more fly fishing? Is it more conventional rig? Tell me kind of what your setup is, and give me kind of a breakdown of, I do this much and this much, and percentage wise.
I guess back then also one of the big things, like when I started with the local ponds, I guess I told my dad, I need an inflatable raft so I can get out on the ponds and fish these things better. From inflatable raft, we got to looking at aluminum boats. From there, we got to fiberglass boats. And in '89, my dad bought a bass boat. And he had a friend, Mark Edelman, that was kind of a local tournament guy. And he would take me out, and he was really the mentor that I had that showed me a lot of like the techniques that work out here and how to work the baits, what baits you want to be looking at. And, really there's something about fishing from a boat that I just really love. I always feel like I probably should have been born on the ocean or something among the tides. But like, I really like fishing from a boat. But, so that takes up a major percentage, I would say, of my fishing is waking up, and, hooking up the boat and going out to the big lakes. And it really can be any size of boat, whether it's a small aluminum boat, a canoe. I love it all. And Another thing that kind of opened up a lot too is we have a cabin in the White Mountains, and there I got to do a lot of like the technical small stream fishing. Again, another mentor type of guy was a friend of my dad's that heard that I was really into fishing, and I think I was probably about 13 when he gave me an Orbis fly rod, and that was my first fly rod. So I always kind of, one thing that I always really liked about like my whole background of fishing was that it's always been it's always varied. I've never just been into only one thing. I really think that it makes you a better angler when you touch on all bases of fishing. There's so many different techniques and ways to fish, fly fishing, bait casting, shallow, deep. And when you really touch on all of them, it makes you, I think, a better angler.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I know with my hunting, people ask me, well, why don't you just focus on one thing? And you tell me what you think, but my biggest answer to people mostly is, if I just did sheep or if I just did elk or Coues deer, focused on one specific animal, turkey, that I feel like I would maybe get burnt out if I was, only focused on one style of hunting, one animal to hunt. I think one of the beauties of doing what we do, and you're a hunter and a fisherman just like me, is we have all these different seasons, and so it seems like we can stay energized and stay proficient at what we do because mentally, we're fired up for maybe turkey season coming up, and then looking forward to trout fishing in the summer, and then maybe looking forward to chasing elk. Whereas you may be looking at, striper fishing at a certain time, and a bass fish, largemouth at another time. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think that's kind of a really great way of putting it all. It does all happen in seasons. Sure, there's ways to target, just bass or just trout year round. But I just think I have one of those personalities where I get really super into things, but I can't hold on to that for 10 years, extended amount of time. I definitely need variety, and I really enjoy that. And when things start slowing down in one world, you can pick up another, technique and go target another species of fish. And, even though here in Arizona, as far as fishing goes, we may not have the variety that somebody growing up in Florida does. We still have a good variety of things to do throughout the year. And like you said, you mix it up with hunting, wing shooting. It's really a neat thing. And variety is the spice of life for me. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Manny, tell me a little bit about, I was on your website last night and this morning, and I just enjoy those videos a lot. But tell me about these big swim baits. Tell me about when you're targeting, what time of year are you typically targeting these big fish? Why is it better some months and not? Give me a little background on that.
So the whole swim bait thing, I would, there's probably a lot of controversy on this, and I don't go too deep into it, but I would say that it's probably something that started in California, and in our western lakes, and this happens here in Arizona also. They stock trout into our bass lakes for trout fishermen. And I think people started realizing that, hey, when that trout truck shows up, they throw in the trout, and then all of a sudden you start hearing and seeing these monster splashes. Something's eating the trout, and it's the bass. And I would say that that's probably how it all started. And even to this day, most of the baits are really kind of focused on trout profiles and trout colors. But I think that, we've all come to realize that it's a biological thing that happens, that in the winter when a fish's metabolism slows down as the water cools down, and they change from being something that's, metabolizing food very quickly and able to have a lot of energy to chase that, which is like the summer when they're chasing smaller things like shad and, smaller bait fish. In the winter, they want to eat less. And it's kind of like the same idea as like, why does a lion, hunt down buffaloes instead of hunting down, chickens? Because that there's nature has a balance. And if they spend too many calories for something that's giving them a low calorie in return, they become skinny and die. So the big bass, as they, when a bass becomes about 5 pounds, 4 pounds, it really starts to change the way it acts, and it starts to become much more focused on eating big and eating less. And I would say, so that's why, the fall, the winter, and, into the spring is kind of a time when the swim baits really shine. If you want to continue fishing swim baits in the summer, you can still do it, but you really need to downsize your offerings, because now you're trying to mimic more like shad and the smaller bait fish like that, the bluegill. So it really makes sense when you think about it, even though most people, when they see the size of these lures, which are, pretty much what I use on my trips, are 10 to 12-inch lures. And most people see these things and think, what are you guys fishing for? Sharks? Or what's going on here? Like, the fish I'm trying to catch are the size of your baits. And
yeah, I know that the other day I was out Canyon Lake and I was looking for sheep, and I pulled up and I was kind of glassing these sheep from the boat, and I was looking up there, and these guys kind of pull up and they're kind of looking at me like, and I'm looking at them like I'm no threat. I'm not even fishing. I'm just looking at the sheep. And they pull out these rods, and I'm not kidding you, they must have cast 80 yards. It was the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. And it looked like they had a 12-inch fish already on. And,
right.
I was like, good night. And then it I'm not much of a bass fisherman, but it brought back, this is probably what Manny's doing with the swim bait.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what was the first time? So you get this swim bait, your first time, and tell me about the first time that you had a big fish hit you, and tell me what it did to you.
Man, I guess probably the first, back in my earlier days, Water Dog Willie's was still around here in Tempe. And those guys helped me out a lot. That's when I kind of first started taking out my dad's boat on my own, with a couple friends or whatever. And, we always saw that they had these goofy looking big trout baits there. And kind of, it was always one of those things that, if you're lucky enough to be there during the trout stocking, you have a chance at catching these big bass. But I would say probably the first time that I had one on the end of my line was with one of these, early Osprey paddle tail swim baits. They're called line throughs because the line goes through it and there's a treble hook on the bottom. And I was swimming that thing at Saguaro Lake, kind of over a boulder, and I was swimming it, and all of a sudden I just see this monster thing flash. Boom! And it ate the bait right away. At that time, you kind of tried to make do with gear that wasn't around yet. Being like the type of reels, the type of rods. I was using a rod that's more specific for something else other than a treble hook. So I lost that fish, but I didn't lose that experience, and from there, I guess it kind of went into looking for more things and going online and, trying to find what other baits are made like this. And I remember that, I started seeing these baits that were pretty expensive, what I thought, at the time, because this was a time when I was, a $15 jerk bait was like a premium bait. Like, wow,
sure.
Lucky Craft $15 jerk bait. Well, you're crazy, And yet I'd go to the store and find these, baits that are $75. So at first, I always wanted to get just floating ones because I thought if I cast one of those off, I'm not going to be able to retrieve it, And so there was other baits that were more like sinking style baits, but I didn't want to mess with that. I wanted to keep it topwater. And, on the other side of that is I always loved very visual styles of fishing. And, I was the kind of guy that I would be happy to go throw a topwater all day long for just a few bites, as opposed to, going and fishing, deep structure, even though I might catch more fish. I wanted the excitement of seeing, again, that taking it back to the snook and to the saltwater, and I like seeing that predatory reaction that bass
The
can
explosion.
give.
You like seeing just that explosion
Absolutely.
on the surface.
Yeah. So, that was kind of how I started swim baits. And I caught a fish on, caught some fish on there. At Pleasant, I caught a striper on it. I had some follows because, these baits have a lot of call and a lot of draw to the fish. They're a curious animal. And even when it's swimming by, and even if they might not eat it or might not be hungry, they follow the bait. So they become visible and you see them. And, I had that happen for a while, and then it kind of just became, just another technique. kind of like jigs or worms, and it kind of got put away for a while. And it wasn't really until I think three years ago that I went again to Saguaro Lake, and a buddy of mine was out there, one of the guides, Dale from the Hookup. He was out there and he says, "Hey, Manny, last night, some of the guys from the shop came out here, and over at Butcher Jones, they stocked trout, and they caught like a 6-pounder and a couple 5s. And wow, at that time, like a 5-pounder was something that I caught once a year,
Mm-hmm.
And we go over there, and I got to experience the day after the stocking, which is kind of like my favorite time to be there. That's when the trout are kind of piled up together. Some of them go off deep. Some of them stay shallow and just run shorelines. And these bass, they started throwing these trout in the air. I mean, I saw trout doing cartwheels. I saw one trout get chased and start porpoising and waking on the surface, and it ran into one of those black ducks. It sounded like a tennis racket. Bah! It ran into it.
Wow.
The duck was like, whack, whack, whack. And all of a sudden, I see like a big swirl underneath. Whoosh! Like that trout disappeared from the earth. So
right then,
yeah,
you probably
that was when I actually saw it happen, and I was like, wow, I got to get back into this swim bait thing because I want to chase that. Like, I want those things. I mean, they sounded like there was a child being thrown into the water.
Yep.
And then I got to see them, throwing them up on the surface, onto the shore. I mean, it was insane. And that really, like, brought the fire back. And from there I started, really looking more into the internet and YouTube and, what are guys throwing? What are they doing? Ran into forums like Swimbait Underground and, really started kind of seeing what this was all about, because again, it was something that was really popular and, gaining more popularity in California than anywhere else. And, so I really started like kind of seeing what those guys were doing. And it's funny now because a lot of these guys that I kind of would see and, in these pictures and all that, they're like friends now, and they come down to visit and we all go fish together. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's been a really neat progression.
Now, do you have a certain swim bait that you like better than others? And if so, what is it?
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about your if you're targeting big fish and you think, okay, it's prime time, tell me about your setup all the way down. Give me the whole rig,
Sure.
everything, what you're using.
So it starts off with, like I was talking about before, before you had to really struggle to find a rod that could even throw these big things. And now you have companies like Lowdown Custom Rods that really creates a rod that's very specific for these baits. These baits, the ones that I like a lot are called glide baits. They, if you're familiar with like a bait that walks the dog, it zigzags on top of the water, like a Zara Spook or something like that. Well, these people created a single jointed bait that's a hard bait, has usually 2 treble hooks. And the neat thing with hydrodynamics, they figured out how to make it walk underwater, but without like the difficult rhythmic techniques. So you just reel in, and with the cadence of your reel, the bait swims side to side to side. And, everybody's kind of always known that there's something about that action that big bass, whether they love it or hate it, they eat it. And so, it starts off with the rod like Lowdown Custom. And, they're made to handle a big treble hook. So it's kind of more like a big crankbait rod rather than a really stiff rod.
Okay.
It has the right action for these treble hooks, for these baits. It has enough backbone to handle throwing these baits. A really neat thing about these rods, they're spiral wrapped, meaning that the guides that the line goes through, they start off on the top, and by the end of the rod, they're on the bottom. And, that there's a few, benefits to that, such as like the line is never really touching the blank. So when you have these big fish that are really putting your gear and your line to the test, it's not rubbing on anything. It also creates a situation where the rod maker can use less guides and smaller guides. So the overall weight of the rod is less. And that really makes the difference between casting one of these things all day long and being tired. Another benefit of these, they have the right size length handles. They're longer. They look like a ninja sword, like a katana or something. But they're very technique specific. and very technical, and it really makes it a much more enjoyable time. You know, when I was first using other kinds of rods, the handles weren't long enough, my hands would hurt, my wrists would hurt. I just thought, hey, this is normal. If you're going to fish swim baits, you're going to have arthritis by the time you're 40, you know, and so it starts off with the rod. The reels, you know, now there's companies that are seeing that, hey, this is a market, it's something that's coming. So, you know, reels are being made for these kind of baits that can handle the weights, handle the line capacity of, you know, 25 to 30, you know, 20-pound line, anything in that range. It can handle enough of that line, but still not be overly huge, something that you can manage and cast. They have stronger drags to them also. And then, you know, the baits, like I was talking about, the glide baits are something that I think is just really neat. It's a very visual style of fishing. You're casting out to visual targets, and you're seeing the bait work in the water. So it almost becomes something where, like, every day I'm not even, like, really worried about what fish I catch or what size it is. I'm just stoked to go and, like, present these things, you know, make the cast, which is much more like golf. You know, you have to really think about the angles, be precise with your cast, and when you put it all together, you get rewarded with a fish. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like on a good day, Manny, on a good day, are you hooking one fish, or is it, you know, every couple of days you're hooking a fish? Or tell me what a good day, if all conditions are right, what are you seeing?
So I think that, you know, the first year that I got into really focusing on using them was kind of a really good year out here. We had a lot of cloud cover, a lot of storm fronts were moving in that year. Barometric pressure has a big effect on fish. It creates a situation where they go shallow. So they're actively hunting shallow. And, you know, at first I would probably get somewhere around 30, 40 follows a day of these fish that I, you know, never used to see. And out of those, maybe, you know, 3 to 4 or even more would bite it, you know, hit the baits. And the thing is, it's a huge learning curve because it's completely different than anything we've ever done before.
You know, as far as setting the hook, you mean?
Hook, when to set the hook, you know, how to fight the fish. It's completely opposite. You're not putting the rod tip up in the air. You're actually throwing it down into the water. You know, the last thing you want is the fish to jump just because of the leverage, the weight that these baits have. They can easily spit them. You know, when to set the hook. Many other techniques, you want to wait for that feel. You know, you want to feel them and then set the hook. This thing, it's almost like intuitive. You have to be watching your bait and really be focused on the bait because it all happens in a split second. You know, it happens real fast, and they very quickly know that it's either real or it's fake, and they spit it out. So, yeah, you know, for the first time, I was getting all these kind of reactions from fish, but it took me about a month until I finally landed a fish on it, just figuring how to set the hook, how to fight them. Now they're at the boat. What do I do now? You know, how to net them, the proper net. We use these big, huge nets. It looks like I'm out there hunting for trophy butterflies or something. But, you know, it all has its very technical reason. So it's almost like tactical stuff that you have to think about everything. When you're on your boat or on the shore, you know, if I get hit right now, which way am I going to set the rod, you know, so I don't hit the trolling motor or, you know, end up in a bad situation. So it really takes a lot of tactical preparedness, you know, that you have to really think a lot about all these things, and it's a huge learning curve.
Absolutely. You know, it sounds like kind of a parallel I'm drawing in my mind is, you know, June, July, and August, usually I'm up in Colorado, and I have a 13-foot fly fishing raft, a Star inflatable with, you know, platforms on the front and back, and I'm typically rowing about 5 days a week, either on the Roaring Fork or the Colorado or the Eagle.
Wow.
And I want to kind of double back to something you said. First, the parallel that I see is I kind of became somewhat of a streamer junkie.
Yeah.
And I know that it took me a while when fishing streamers for brown trout. Your hook set is more of a strip set and down, not the typical dry fly set that, you know, would be up. And if you do that up, you know, raise the rod up, you're just pulling that streamer right out of their mouth.
Yeah.
And
as soon as you can figure out to strip set or set down and, keep it low, your hook sets go way up.
Yeah.
Once you get it, then it's like, oh, this is, it's a totally different way to do it. Mm-hmm. One thing I want to circle back to that you said, which I know is similar when I'm fishing brown trout, on cloudy days, brown trout seem to be they're a lot more predatory fish, and they seem to be out when it's cloudy.
Yeah.
Bring me back to bass fishing and what you were saying about cloudy days, and that's sometimes better for swim bait fishing. Is that true?
I think so. Somebody told me, a friend of mine, back in the day, he used to be kind of a professional bass angler, and, he kind of explained it to me that it has to do with the barometric pressure. In the water, they also feel that change in pressure even a lot more than we do. And any fish that has a swim bladder, it starts affecting the gases inside the bladder, so they become more unstable. It's harder for them to stay deep, so they have to go shallow. And it's kind of nature's way of, everything with a bladder has to go shallow to equalize that pressure. So it's kind of like nature's way of making the predator, letting the predator feed before the storm comes in, because then it could be a few days before it becomes easy for them to feed again. Wind could kick up water, turbulence, silt in the water, like many factors can happen that will make it harder for that predator to get its food. So it's really interesting how that happens. And, it happens in streams, lakes, probably even the ocean. I mean, it happens everywhere. Any fish that has that bladder will be affected by that. And yeah, definitely when I look back at like a lot of my videos, a lot of those hits are on hazy, cloudy days and, prefrontal conditions.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great to know. Mm-hmm. Manny, what's your forecast for what you're seeing going on? I mean, you're on the water virtually every day. Mm-hmm. How far are we away from the bass really starting to spawn? What are you seeing out there? What are you seeing?
I think it's coming. My boat has actually been in the shop for like 2 weeks, getting a new trolling motor after 7 years. Mine finally died. So I haven't really been out in this newer, warmer weather. I have heard that, people are starting to see a lot more fish shallow, and just like, again, the spawn is coming, whether the weather does whatever it does, it's coming. The fish are going to start moving shallow. Tomorrow, I'm pretty sure we're going to start seeing, a lot more of these fish shallow. And it goes from feeding more to a aggression reaction. So the fish, they want to start clearing the shallows. They start clearing them of sunfish, of smaller bass. They start kind of becoming real, not just predatory, but almost territorial. Yes, with their areas. So they're going to start clearing those areas up, and that's when, the baits of our size become really irritating for them to see them there. And that's kind of going to happen from now throughout the spawn. The spawn kind of used to be a time when, before I knew about these baits, the spawn was neat because that was a time when fish were on beds, and it was like our chance to catch those bigger fish. Now that I know how to catch them, and even more techniques that involve not fishing them on the beds, it makes it really interesting. Basically what happens is on the beds, you see the smaller males. Those bigger females are just back deeper out of sight. And when you run these swim baits by these, in those areas, it starts really aggravating those females, and you really get into some big fish. So
Manny, would you say that, the best 30 days is right in front of us, or is it still 2 weeks out? Give me kind of a...
Yeah, let's see, end of February here through probably the beginning or middle of May, really until it starts getting warm. What'll happen is we stop seeing the real big ones, and we start seeing just a lot of smaller fish, being like
Gotcha.
1.5 pounds, 2 pounds. We start seeing more of those, and then the summer sets in, and it just becomes kind of a little too hot and miserable to be out there for me.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's when you shift and start fishing other places, right?
Yes, that's when actually it's kind of neat because the carp, they love to be in the warmer water. And the carp is a funny thing that, that's something that in my time has become almost like more of a cult following for carp on the fly rod.
Sure.
My first one was probably 15 years ago. I remember I was just I was getting a little burnt out on chasing bass in the urban ponds, and I wanted something bigger. And down the street, there was a certain pond that I found these carp that were eating really shallow. Like half of their back was out of the water. It's kind of more of like a retention water place, more than like an urban, cement lined pond. And I remember throwing a hopper out there, because thinking, hey, if their mouth, I can see their mouth, maybe I can get this hopper to go into that mouth by accident. And sure enough, one ate it, and it didn't jump. Carp do not jump, but it cleared water in inches of water so fast going towards the deep that it went into the air. And
it just spool you.
Yeah, and I instantly, I got to see the backing for the first time in my Arizona history, and it sparked a whole obsession. I wanted to learn how to catch these carp, and I realized hey, this is great practice for bonefish, redfish, these other things that I only got to do once a year. I could practice on these carp, and it truly is it's not a game fish, but it's a great, it's a great thing to do. And, in Arizona, it's our hardest fighting fish, whether we like it or not. They're the ones that are going to put you into the backing, really fight for a long extended time, and you pull them out of the water, and they can be anywhere from, 10 pounds to 30 pounds. So
wow. Now in your guide service, I want you to tell me about your guide service, but I also want you to tell me, do you do trips for carp? And tell me about that, and then tell me about your striper and your bass fishing. Tell me about what a typical day is, and give me some insight on that.
It's really neat. It's become, with the world of social media, I never thought that would be such a door and an avenue for me to make this dream happen of being a guide. Instagram, Facebook, I started putting these videos and these pictures up, and people started calling this whole thing the Manny Chee experience. And that's kind of why that stuck on,
I love it.
That's
what
I call it, the Manny Chee experience. And
I love it.
It's what I usually fish. Bass we fish out of my Ranger 223 Cayman. It's actually a 22-foot flat skiff, like a Texas style skiff. And it makes a lot of sense. I bought it new in 2007, and I was kind of fed up with the bass boat setup of having, a pedal, because I was also doing, bass on fly back then, more than the swim bait thing. So I wanted something that was, that would cater to the bass or to the fly rods. I can, fit the lockers fit a full fly rod, not having to take it apart. It's all deck. It's all clear of, foot pedals and all that kind of thing. And there's no carpet on the boat. It's a saltwater style deck. So one thing I hated was always having to recarpet your boat, and always, dirt, or you take your dog and now there's oil and mud on your deck. And, so I use that saltwater boat, and it runs super shallow, 10.5 inches of water, but at the same time it can handle big wind or big waves that are put out by, some other boats. So it's a really safe platform for that. That's how I fish the bass. And the whole experience thing, I just in November I moved into a new house. I now have a couple rooms where clients can stay, their own bathroom, their own room, the shower. And it's really neat because I've kind of created this niche market with the social media of people that are pretty much my age, and they come stay with me for a few days. And that, just the way fishing is here in Arizona, from somebody that, fishes consistently, you'll see that one day is just really good, and for no rhyme or reason, the next day is really bad. And then, it's really good again all of a sudden. So I really like when people get to come and stay with me for multiple days, because we really get to experience, at least one of those days will be good.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that, and part of that whole experience too is these swim baits, they're really hard to get. Nothing is really available at Bass Pro Shops or Kmart, Walmart, or, you can't just go online and order them. They're really a boutique type thing. Even the companies that make them are smaller companies. They're limited productions. A lot of stuff comes from Japan. A lot of really neat stuff comes from the USA, what we call garage builds. So it's somebody that usually has another job or another, way to make money, but they also have such a passion for creating things and fishing that they make these handmade baits. They take a lot of tuning, that action that they have and the way they hover and in the water, like it's really tough to get to it. So
do you have a certain company that you really like, or
yeah,
a certain bait?
I really like the Roman made stuff. Roman made is from Japan, and they make a bait called the Mother. It's a 12-inch bait. It's made out of wood, and it's really a piece of art that you fish, and the draw and the, just the technology and the R&D, research and development that goes into making that, it's amazing. It really does have a different effect on fish. Another guy from San Diego, Andrew Hinkle, makes an amazing bait also. That's an 11-inch trout imitation, and it's really neat that these baits that, even though they're trout, you can take them to states and waters that have never seen a trout, and it's all about size and profile, which is what makes these fish eat it. And the whole Manny Chee experience, the neat thing about it is that, I talk to a lot of these people. They see the benefit in having these baits on my boat because you're putting them in the hands of potential customers.
Sure.
People that have enough expendable income to buy these rods, be out here with me on a trip. They have the money to buy these baits and the interest in it. So it's a really neat way for them to get their names out too. But the whole experience is that, hey, that bait that you've been seeing online and that's going for $400 or $500, here it is. Let's fish it. Let me show you how to fish this thing, and you can decide whether you want to buy this one or not and how it'll work in your waters. That's all part of the whole Manny Chee experience. When you're out there with me, you're on the best boat. You're having the best rods, low-down custom rods. You have the best reels, which, those are just different companies make different reels for different situations. So I keep all of the best ones and, the hardest to get baits. So you'll be fishing there, and just in your hands, you can easily have $1,000, or more than $1,000 sitting in your hand instead of, going out and having to spend a lot of money on buying the right baits, the wrong baits. I bought this thinking it would do that, and it actually doesn't. It cuts down a lot on the learning curve is basically what my trips are all about.
So if someone wants to fly out here and go fishing with you, they can stay with you.
Yeah.
They don't even have to bring any gear. They can use your gear.
Correct.
And they roll around with you for a couple days, and then they're back off to the airport, and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Manny, what is your website? What is your Instagram? Give me the addresses.
Yeah. Everything
how
is
people
under
can
Manny
contact
Chee,
you.
MANNYCHEE. So MannyChee.com is the website. Manny Chee is the Instagram. Manny Chee is the Facebook.
Makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, it does. And it's not just bass, I also have a drift boat that I use in the urban ponds to target those carp. So that's pretty neat because, you get to fish from an actual drift boat. So you have the whole feel of like a fly fishing, experience.
Oh, so like a fly fishing drift boat?
Yeah.
That's what you use?
I use a Hog Island drift boat for the carp trips, and also for like mountain, trout lakes. I use the drift boat. So it's a very steady, safe platform. There's no tipping over. There's no worry about it. It's not a small little aluminum john boat. It's, it's proper setups. If there's one thing that I really like to have is just the best gear. I'm an Orvis endorsed guide, and I use, they give us big discounts on gear. And the way I look at that is that makes it affordable for us to have their best product lines. And, even if the fishing isn't great, your experience is going to be great, and what you learn will be great. And it's almost like a demo day that you get to come out and try out the latest, best stuff, whether it's fly fishing,
awesome.
swim baits, whatever we're targeting. You're going to have prime gear in your hands, and you're going to learn a lot of lessons that, have taken me many years to learn, or many dollars to learn,
Absolutely. A lot of trial and error.
Exactly.
Manny, I know you got to go get that boat today. I want to finish on, tell me about two things. Tell me about the video setup that you have. You must have a camera that's mounted on the boat. And then second, I want you to finish I noticed there's a young gentleman that I've seen in a bunch of your videos, and your videos are unbelievable.
Thank you.
But there's a he looks young, like 15, 16 years old, maybe younger. And seems like there's a series of progression. You've been fishing with him for a couple years. Tell me who that is, and tell me what it means to you to be fishing with the youth, much like you were fishing with someone that was mentoring you.
Okay, so my camera setup, I just use the GoPro cameras. You know, they're neat because you can mount them anywhere, and you know, really modular. You know, they make lots of different mounts, so you can have them hanging off your rod, your head, your boat, your underwater. You know, they definitely have some downfalls like overheating out here in Arizona. You know, the batteries, they become, you know, it almost becomes a little bit aggravating having to deal with it, but it's definitely worth it because one of those days you'll catch the big, you know, a fish of a lifetime. You'll have it on camera.
Sure.
So I use that. I use Adobe Premiere for the editing. I was never into cameras or, you know, making film or, you know, home movies. I actually always hated that. The last thing I would ever want to hear is like my voice on a video. You know, I just feel like, God, you sound so stupid, you know, and you look dumb too. But it's just something that I knew I had to do, and I did it. And just, you know, the gentleman that helped me with my website, Adam, he told me from the start, he said, Manny, this, you know, it's all about your enthusiasm and your love and your passion for this. You need to like put that through in your videos. And from what I hear, I've done a good job with that, I guess.
Yes, you have. I love watching your
Thank
videos
you so
on
much.
your website, for sure. Absolutely.
And then, so the mystery kid that is in, you know, a few of my videos is the little boss, Henry Wagey. Henry is, when he first came out with me, he was 5 years old. And
wow.
He's like a small kid, you know, kind of like how I was.
Yeah.
He's not a big 5-year-old. He's a very small 5-year-old. And his dad got a hold of me through the Orvis store because I made a carp video, and, you know, I kind of put up my sponsors on my videos. And from there, he went to the local Orvis store in Scottsdale. He said, hey, do you guys know this Manny Chee guy? And, of course, they're all homies. So, yeah, you know, yeah, Manny Chee, you know, here's his information and blah, blah, blah. So Scott Wagey, his dad, gets a hold of me and says, hey, you know, my name is Scott Wagey. I have this kid, 5-year-old Henry, and he loves your videos. Like, he comes home and, you know, Dad, put the Manny Chee video on. Put the Manny Chee video on. So he was like, I got a hold of you and, like, would like to see about, you know, booking a trip. And that was, like, in December. And I was like, man, you know, there's no – he said that, you know, he's casting a fly rod. You know, it's something that they've been doing together. He's been working with him, and he can somewhat cast a fly rod. So I thought, okay, well, let's, you know, probably the best thing going will be a carp trip. You know, it's on this big safe drift boat. It's in a local pond. It's not a huge, you know, trip out into the outdoors, but yet, you know, we'll get a taste for things. And sure enough, we went out and we got him on carp. And it was awesome. And now, you know, fast forward like 2 years, he's 7 now. He double hauls a fly rod. He's an amazing caster, and he has this passion that, like, I saw in myself. And, you know, it's almost like it's really awesome for me to see a dad and a mom that are nurturing that passion in the right way, you know, giving him opportunities to grow that passion. And the kid's fishy. Like, he's amazing. You know, there's just something about him. He already has, you know, his biggest largemouth is a 5-pounder. His biggest smallmouth is 4 pounds. You know, he's caught his own stripers. He's, you know, kills trout out there. Just, you know, hammers everything. He catches 30-pound carp. It's really an amazing thing. And it's really what, like, you know, really like makes me feel great about what I'm doing. You know, whenever I kind of get down on things, I always look and I say, you know, I'm being that guy that somebody was for me, like what Mark Edelman did for me back in the day. It feels so good to now pass that on to somebody like Henry, you know, from such a young age, because I know that for the rest of his life, he'll remember those trips. And whether he likes it or not, they're on the internet, you know, he loves it. But, yeah, you know, those videos will always be there, those pictures and those memories. And it's just it's really neat to me that I'm going to be that guy that taught him, showed him these things, and showed him my passion. And, you know, we shared some amazing memories. So that's it definitely like makes me like that's what life's all about, I think.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, kudos to you for doing
Thank
that
you.
with him, and just love watching your stuff. I'm glad we got to spend some time here today. I look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you for having me, Jay.
I'll be watching Instagram and your Facebook to see how the next month goes for you, or next month and a half. And I just wish you the best of success. And like I said, I look forward to doing it again. And thanks for being with us. And guys, go check out Manny Chee on Instagram, on his website, and on his Facebook. His videos are incredible. And thanks for being on. And I'll catch you later.
Definitely. Thanks, Jay. Bye.
All right, Manny. Take care.
Wow, what an awesome show with Manny Chee. Manny is definitely one of our best fishermen in the state in all species, but he really focuses on those big bass. The pictures coming out of his Instagram account the last couple days have been amazing. The fishing's really turned on for him, and just glad that he was able to spend some time with us. I want to thank our listeners for supporting us here at J. Scott Outdoors Podcast. And if you like what you're hearing, give us some good reviews on iTunes. Give us some 5-star reviews. And go ahead and keep sending your questions and comments to jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. You can also follow along at jscottoutdoors.com, on our Facebook at jscottoutdoors, Instagram jscottoutdoors, and on our YouTube channel jscottoutdoors. I wanted to cover a question that was asked of Glenn R. from New Mexico asks, what is the best advice for glassing Coues deer on windy days? And one of the things that I can tell you that Dara and I do on a windy day is we try and find which direction the wind is blowing, and we try and put that wind directly into our face. So if we have a, gusting 15, 20 mile an hour wind and it's directly in our face, and our goal is to put it directly into our binos so we're looking directly on the lee side, so where the wind is coming from. And a lot of times those Coues deer will be taking cover in the open or sometimes on the thick, but definitely on the lee side of the hill, so the least windy side of the hill. Another question comes in from Adam C. from Denver, Colorado. He asked, have you had a chance to try out the Coues Chinook series yet? How would it be for bow hunting? For a long time, the attack pant, the Coues attack pant has been my favorite archery elk and, say, spring turkey pant to wear. And I just have spent my first season in the Chinook pant. I used them quite a bit on sheep scouting for the auction tag, and I gotta say, I used them in Mexico for Coues deer in January as well, and I really like this new Chinook series. It's got a really good feeling material to them. It's got a nice stretch. The pockets are in the right place. I really like the jacket too. The jacket seems to be real nice and form-fitting, and it's just got a real sleek fit. So actually, yeah, I think it would be great, Adam, for bow hunting. And we're going to be talking quite a bit more about all the different Coues garments here in a future podcast with Coues founder Jason Hairston, and we're going to cover all of that, so we'll dive more into your questions. Guys, I appreciate your support, and thanks, and until next time, God bless.